Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Everybody is on time. I love it. I appreciate it. Hmm. We'll get started here shortly. Hey Bill, glad you could join. Nice
Thank
another
you.
Thursday, and we are ready to roll. So, thanks for joining everybody. Today's presentation is going to be focused around weight loss and metabolic health. Before we jump into details, quick disclaimer, be very, very clear and transparent. I'm not a medical professional. I am a scientist. I studied political science, so it's a little bit different. I am here representing myself, Kaizen Innovations, to review clinical data and share personal experience. I'm not at all endorsing or promoting any specific company, brand outside of that context. Content is intended to inform, not to market or encourage the use of any unapproved products. We need to clarify that this presentation is educational purposes only. I am not providing medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. This information is not intended as marketing, promotional, or legal advice. Many of the products we're going to discuss are not FDA approved and they are designated and intended for research use only. So everybody on this call should be a researcher. I am not liable for any of this information, how it's interpreted or applied outside of educational context. My goal is to share general knowledge, emerging research, not direct clinical care. I encourage everyone to review this content through the lens of individual clinical judgment and regulatory guidelines. Okay, let's jump into it. So today's goal is to basically break down um, peptides and compounds and how they're being researched for metabolic effect, weight loss, currently today. So we're going to be talking about things like the recent developments with the GLPs. We're going to talk about AOD 9604, tesofensine, 5-amino 1-MQ. We're going to go through brief history on each, as well as how they work, their mechanism of action. I think the I think the responsible thing to do is to remind everyone on the call that peptides are not a magic bullet. I think everybody should really think of them a little bit differently. And so when I think of it, I really think about if you're building a house, the foundation is critical. If the foundation is not perfect, then the house is going to be unstable. And so, with that in mind, exercise is a non-negotiable. Peptides are great at doing a lot of things, including, increasing growth hormone, etc. But exercise is primary. It's really essential for metabolic flexibility, mitochondrial biogenesis, insulin sensitivity. So, although peptides can amplify these adaptations, but they do not create them from scratch. So, you have to earn the right to use them. Additionally, nutrition. This is a key component for anybody interested in weight loss and metabolism. Additionally, sleep and stress management. These are really foundational. And so, there's no biological free lunch. And so I would encourage everyone's first place to look is discipline their diet, discipline their routine into exercise, sleep, and nutrition. So with that, we're going to start with the triple G. So the triple G is the latest in the GLP family. It is GLP-1, GIP, and it adds glucagon receptors stimulation. So these agents represent advanced uh, insertin-based therapeutics currently in late-stage clinical development. So research demonstrates that the reduction is up to 24% of body weight at the 48-week mark. Pretty incredible, along with improvements of glucose regulation, lipid profiles, and even inflammatory markers. So the triple agonist shows potential application across obesity, insulin sensitivity, even broader metabolic dysfunctions. So the GLP-1 pathway is really focused on reducing appetite, slowing gastric emptying, and when we add GIP, we reduce the commonality of a lot of the common negative outcomes, including nausea, vomiting, etc. And when we add the third, the glucagon receptor pathway, it actually has been shown to increase basal metabolic rate, boost thermogenesis, and enhance fat oxidation. So when you combine these components, it's actually pretty incredible. If anybody looks up on Instagram or TikTok, although that's not the best place to receive your science, people are raving about the triple G agonist. So, I'm not going to talk about dosing protocols, as it's really important to me to remain in compliance with all regulatory bodies. But essentially, the triple G currently is being studied. It really shines because it's reducing those side effects that we talked about. So, a lot fewer instances of nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, even heart rate increases. And so, want to talk about. So recently, I know everybody knows about the GLPs, but I thought I'd highlight some recent findings. The AAMC reports recently emphasized strong weight loss in older patients, but also raised potential concerns for muscle loss, frailty, even highlighting the need for careful monitoring in this demographic. And I would add that nutrition is paramount as well. Everybody who's on a GLP really needs to be on a high protein diet, low carbohydrates. Again, these are not a cheat code. You still need to do the work and maintain that baseline uh, of nutrition, right? So very high protein combination to help stave off any muscle wasting. Additionally, recently uh, in Nature, suggests that GLP-1s could impact addiction by modifying brain reward systems, so potentially opening new therapeutic avenues. Additionally, the World Health Organization recently released a guidance endorsing GLP-1 therapies for chronic obesity, but underscores the necessity to combine them with lifestyle intervention and addressing global accessibility challenges. So these insights collectively illustrate the growing scope of the GLP-1s. I think new research is coming out constantly, showing the benefits and potential benefits of these compounds. AOD 9604. People love this peptide. So specifically, this is designed, it's the way I think about it is essentially it's a piece of the human growth hormone chain. It was originally developed focusing on isolating the fat mobilizing effects of human growth hormone while avoiding the growth promotion and glucose altering components of the full growth hormone chain. So initially, this was explored as an anti-obesity medication, and it currently remains under research. So again, human growth hormone chain is a very long protein, and it does a bunch of different things. But one small very piece is focused on fat metabolism. So this piece is copied and made into a standalone peptide that we know as AOD 9604. So it's essentially designed to act on fat without the rest of the implications of human growth hormone. And so once AOD 9604 hits the bloodstream, it tends to act on specifically on fat tissue where adipocytes, excuse me, decide whether to store or release their energy. So inside these depots, basically plugs in a signaling pathway that normally responds to fat burn messages. So essentially it's turning up the turning up the fat burning component of your body. So AOD 9604 basically helps switch on lipolysis, which is the process of breaking down stored triglycerides into free fatty acids that can then be burned into energy. And at the same time, it makes it actually harder for the cell to turn new calories into long-term fat storage. So it's basically like nudging the fat cell toward a net loss over time. So it's different from growth hormone because AOD 9604 does not significantly raise IGF-1 or drive broad tissue growth, but rather it behaves basically like a specialist. So it's carrying only the fat burning instructions of growth hormone, not the growth, not the sugar handling components. So still under research, but it has a lot of promising research behind it currently. Tesofensine. So tesofensine is interesting. It is actually a tablet. So this is typically utilized orally, and it was actually originally being studied for neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But it was later just kind of increased the scope into an anti-obesity agent. So produces a substantial amount of weight loss in trials, mainly by reducing the energy intake rather than directly increasing peripheral thermogenesis. Meaning, so the mechanism of action, it's basically acting as a triple monoamine reuptake inhibitor. So it's blocking the reuptake of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in key brain regions. So this increase on a synaptic level and signaling these neurotransmitters basically regulate hunger, satiety, how well you satiate, how full you are, and energy balance. So it essentially enhances how satiated you are, reducing hunger over time, leading to lower spontaneous caloric intake without explicit caloric restrictions or instructions. So it modulates the reward related pathway in your brain by boosting dopaminergic tone, which can blunt hedonic and craving driven food seeking. I very much fit into that category. And so, additionally, when you elevate norepinephrine signaling, it actually can modestly increase baseline metabolic tone and sympathetic outflow. So, this contributes to secondarily leads to essentially fat loss. Overall, weight loss effects appear dominated by appetite suppression and energy expenditure, with energy expenditure, and changes to, but that's kind of a less key detail. It doesn't have such a energy expenditure component, but it's basically regulating your appetite. I would say that also great care needs to be taken with tesofensine. Definitely people that are using any other um, reuptake inhibitors, including like, you know, SSRIs or even Adderall, they would not be good potential use cases. Okay, 5 amino 1MQ. So this is a very small molecule, NNMT, which is nicotinamide N-methyltransferase inhibitor. So it's not really a classic peptide, but often discussed in peptide therapy context. So it's orally bioavailable, so it's a tablet. It's a synthetic compound with high cell permeability, and it selectively targets that NNMT enzyme. So currently in study for metabolic enhancement, fat oxidation, and cellular energy optimization in preclinical and early clinical models. So how does it work? Again, it's blocking the NMMT enzyme, which is normally converts niacin or nicotinamide into waste metabolite. So essentially draining your NAD stores. So really what this is doing, this is correlated with NAD. It preserves NAD by preventing the depletion of NAD. And so NAD obviously critical for mitochondrial function. So really you can think of it as activating the it essentially activates the energy and longevity pathways, preserving NAD fuels the mitochondrial ATP production for energy, activates SIRT1 and related proteins that promote fat oxidation and cellular repair. Also enhances fat burning and metabolic flexibility. Cells actually shift towards burning fat and away from storing fat. It is a non-stimulant mechanism, so unlike a lot of common and historical appetite suppressants, the 5 amino 1MQ works through metabolic optimization rather than actually stimulating your CNS, making it suitable for broader populations. So, not going to go into dosing in order to remain compliant, but generally taken in the morning, as some people actually do report a mild energizing effect. Again, there are preclinical and early stage data suggests its potential utility in individuals with metabolic concerns. CJC 1295, very popular synthetic analog for growth hormone releasing hormone. And so essentially, this was discovered in the 1980s, and they realized that they could actually stimulate growth hormone release, but there was a catch. The hormone broke down within minutes. And so it didn't really make it very good for practical use. And so for over 2 decades, researchers worked to solve this puzzle, developing all the way to the 2000s when each of the kind of the last components were figured out. And so in the early 2000s, CJC 1295 emerged as a breakthrough, a redesigned GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, that resisted the body's natural degradation. So finally making growth hormone stimulation clinically feasible and superior to, in some cases, superior to injecting growth hormone directly. How does it work? So essentially, it's a lock and key mechanism. So CJC 1295 enters the bloodstream, finds its target, the growth hormone releasing hormone receptor, actually specifically in the pituitary gland. So it binds with great precision and almost like a lock and key. It knows exactly where to go. So once it's bound, it actually triggers a cascade inside the cell, which results in producing and releasing growth hormone. So with a single injection, produces almost 2 to 10 times fold spike in growth hormone serum that lasts up to 6 days, and IGF levels climb anywhere from 1.5 to 3x for 9 to 11 days. So very powerful growth hormone releasing hormone, and so really the really key indicator for this is the albumin. So uh, people are all constantly asking because these products, these peptides are commonly utilized with DAC and without DAC. And so DAC is actually the drug affinity complex. And so this innovation is really what makes it possible. It binds to albumin, which is the most abundant protein in the blood. And so it actually acts as a protective shield, which allows for that sustained utilization. Tesamorelin, ipamorelin. So this is a combination between two separate peptides that work on two totally separate pathways. So tesamorelin is a synthetic growth hormone analog, and it works upstream on the pituitary. Ipamorelin is a ghrelin receptor agonist that activates growth hormone secretagogue receptors and complete in a completely different mechanism. So why are they used together? Well, when you combine, they activate two totally distinct pathways that converge for maximum growth hormone release. So tesamorelin stimulates your growth hormone releasing hormone, whereas ipamorelin stimulates via the ghrelin receptor, and the result is a lot more growth hormone, quickly increases your growth hormone. Actually, I've read research that stated when used in combination, it's actually 5x as opposed to using either one alone. So very synergistic. So again, tesamorelin is going to bind to that growth hormone receptor, triggering the release through the natural rhythm, whereas ipamorelin selectively binds to the ghrelin receptors, directly stimulating it as a kind of a downstream effect through the brain. MOTS-c, another very popular uh, weight loss peptide. And so this works completely differently. So this works actually on the mitochondrial. So it's essentially MOTS-c is a 16 amino acid. It's encoded directly by the mitochondrial DNA, and it was discovered fairly recently. And it's essentially nicknamed the mitochondrial derived peptide. It acts on metabolic messenger from the powerhouse of the cell, to regulate systemic energy, metabolism, and stress adaptation. And unlike traditional hormones synthesized by the endocrine glands, MOTS-c is produced by the mitochondria themselves. So, in response to exercise and metabolic stress, that allows the cells to communicate energy status across the entire body and adapt to changing demands. So, primary action, MOTS-c targets skeletal muscle and activates the AMPK pathway, fundamentally reshaping how cells produce and utilize energy. Preclinical data shows MOTS-c improves potential for improving insulin sensitivity, restoring metabolic flexibility, including, so that's essentially how we switch between burning fat or glucose. Also enhances exercise performance, reducing visceral fat, and mitigates age-related metabolic decline, essentially acting as a exercise mimetic. So that there are some other notable peptides that should be noted, including IGF-1 LR3, which is essentially a different chain, a different component of human growth hormone, specifically targeting muscle growth and muscle enhancement. Care needs to be taken around that one. Definitely, people need to do the research as it can negatively impact, can basically make you, I believe it's a hypoglycemic. It'll lower your blood sugar. And then Sloop 223, another exercise mimetic, which a lot of people like. We don't have time to get into it today, as today there is a kind of a time constraint. Big takeaway is further research is necessary. And to be very clear, in no way is this meant to be a complete training. This is really just my idea behind these webinars is just to kind of stimulate interest, share general understanding of these peptides. I strongly suggest that anyone interested in peptides do a lot of research. These are some of my favorite research websites and books, including peptideprotocols.io. This is a paid website on a monthly basis. They've got a lot of great research, references, all kinds of great information. Additionally, they do have some basic marketing as like a Canva template. I'm not associated with peptideprotocols.io. I don't make any money from any of these, but I think it's important to share. Additionally, the Peptide University has some basic self-study learning. That's a one-time fee. I think I paid $50 or $60 for a year. One thing I really like about them is they basically have like a quick reference guide where they have about 72 peptides listed out, and they just give you kind of the fast and dirty, very fast protocols, how it's reconstituted, etc., even a peptide calculator. And then in terms of books, the Peptide Handbook by James Laval is my top go-to book. It's available on Amazon. Additionally, Dr. Seeds has an excellent book, Peptide Protocols Volume 1. And the International Peptide Society does have online certifications as well as in-person courses. Very important. Anybody who's interested in doing research into peptides, be very well educated. These are very powerful compounds that really need to be well understood. And so, with that, I will stop sharing